Hi, I'm Olivia Wilde, the director of The Invite, and you are watching IndieWire. Joe, you remember Peanut Hog?
Bit of a contentious environment in here, so I understand.
We love a contentious environment.
My understanding is Rashida and Will write a first draft of this American adaptation of a very successful Spanish film, Sentimental, which I guess also was made in Italian and Korean.
It was. No, this is crazy. It was first a play written by Chess Guy, who directed the play. He then adapted his own play into a film called Sentimental. That was a small Spanish independent film. That film then gets adapted into, I think, 7 adaptations. I know there's a South Korean, there is a German, there's an Italian, there's a French, and I think there might be 3 more because I remember the number being 7, unless it's 7 total, including ours. But it then gets adapted by Rashida and Will into an English language adaptation that landed on my desk.
First as an actor, right?
First as an actor, yeah.
And you didn't want it as an actor.
Well, it was very different at that point. It was a role that actually turned out to be the role that Penelope Cruz now plays in the film, but it was a very, very different incarnation of that role. It wasn't right for me, but I was so intrigued by this project. I thought any story that has been adapted by different cultures in this way must have a kind of root to it that feels very universally true. And it turns out relationships are difficult in every language. And I think that that's what drew me to it as a director, was the idea that there was a chance to make a version of this that felt specific to not only to an English-speaking audience, but to this cast that we could bring to this, who all personalized it and really continued the adaptation through this workshopping process.
That idea, it's interesting because I have to assume at that point, you just brought up cast, that's the starting point, because of course, ultimately that's what's going to get it pushed forward, right?
Well, actually, we weren't waiting for cast to get it greenlit to make the movie. We were making the movie, and it is my favorite part of the process to cast something. I started as a casting intern.
I was about to say, you came up under a legend.
Yes.
You weren't waiting tables and
no.
doing acting school.
I was waiting the coffee table in the waiting room at Mally Finn Casting and bringing coffee to many people who later became my colleagues, which is a really funny way to initially get to know people. I have a tremendous respect for casting directors and really the casting process. I always really admired that Wong Kar-wai quote about not knowing what your film is until your actors tell you what it is through these characters. I think that it was when he was discussing In the Mood for Love, and he was saying that these actors created these characters and this movie. It's not something that exists without them, without what they do to personalize it, to confess through these characters. And I think that's true for every great film. And I certainly had experienced that. I felt for this movie that the cast would come in and kind of tell us how to specify this. And they sure did, because we then had this workshopping process where Rashida, Will, Penelope, Edward, Seth, and myself sat together for 2 weeks before filming. And in those 2 weeks, really reworked the script.
Because Rashida and Will had not had a chance to do another draft of this since the new cast came in. So to a certain degree, there's a redrafting process that's going along with a workshop process.
Yes, which was incredibly exciting and also took a tremendous amount of openness on their part to kind of allow for this personalization of the characters through these actors, really taking big leaps. I mean, making pretty huge changes and being game for that. And this process was really rigorous and fun, and it came out of a lot of improvisation, a lot of discussion. And then we started filming, and because we were filming in order, which was something that became clear was possible once we were in one location, and I thought, my God, we finally have an opportunity to shoot in one location, shooting in order, let's do it. We knew we could continue the workshopping process. So the film continued to be reimagined as we made it.
Are you an interior designer or something?
What? Oh, thank you, no.
No, he's a fireman.
Firefighter, we say.
you're not.
Firefighter.
You're a
I was.
firefighter?
He was?
You're not a fire.
Was.
You weren't a firefighter.
Yeah, he was fire captain.
You were a fire captain.
Captain Hawk?
Captain Hawk. No,
Oh
you
my
weren't.
God.
You're not Captain Hawk. That's bullshit.
But let's go back to the workshop. You're talking about 2 weeks roughly, is that right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the four of you in the cast, and then the two of them, and then the director too, that there was something about all of it being personal and cathartic for all of you.
Yeah.
Like you kind of like there was something about that process, not only the idea that workshopping and collaborating, but that there was each of you kind of was pouring something into it.
Yes. There was a lot of kind of collective confession. And I love the way Seth discusses this, which is that in order to discuss relationships, everyone had to kind of reveal what they consider a healthy relationship to be, which was very revealing about our personal lives. And we all very quickly started to share our experiences and what we had learned in life, in therapy, what we thought about these characters and how we judged them. And that was extremely revealing and interesting and totally cathartic. And I just don't think this would have worked without this specific group of people who were all game for that kind of process. It was something that required a level of vulnerability that everyone bought into.
You have a bunch of talents, but if there's one thing that you brought to the table right from the start, it was a sense of tone and rhythm. You know, Booksmart has those like record scratch moments of changing pace and going where it is. I wanted you to talk about that in context of this workshop and the casting process, because we could go through the four roles and they're individually great, but there's an element here of cadence and the way they talk and rhythm that I think probably has to start at the casting level.
Yes.
But then is something that has to be figured out in that workshopping writing phase, right?
Yes, completely. Yes. It's particularly because Seth and I naturally have a very different rhythm to Edward and Penelope. So I do feel like when I am kind of
two couples talk at their own.
Exactly. When I am mapping the tone of a film, I do feel like I can sort of hear and feel the rhythm of it, the rhythm of the dialogue, and can feel when it needs more or less energy and movement throughout it. I can kind of see and feel the shape of it. And as you start reading it and feeling it, you know when something is missing and something is needed. And that workshopping process was about understanding, like, we've overstayed our welcome here. This has become redundant. This tone has lost its energy. We need a sharp turn. I felt that process allowed us to really stay connected to the emotional experience of the audience and what we wanted for them. And to know that in order for this to remain an interesting, unpredictable piece, which even though very simple, we still wanted to feel surprising, we had to make sure that we took the audience in enough different directions and kind of surprised them in a way that allowed for it to be engaging throughout.
No, I just want to be honest. We were at the door before we rang, and we could hear you were fighting.
Oh, we were fighting.
We were fighting,
yeah.
Bit of a contentious environment in here, so I understand if that's repellent to you. No hard feelings, you know what I mean? Completely understand, you know?
We love a contentious environment.
I felt that by understanding everybody's kind of personal tonal rhythms in rehearsal, I could then feel how to map that out. And everyone could feel it. Seth and I just immediately understood that we had an ability to match our rhythm. Like, we just could harmonize right away. It was an interesting thing. I noticed it when we were making the studio, which is why I became obsessed with Seth. It was so clear to me that we really thought in the same way about a scene and could kind of sense when the scene needed a certain kind of rhythmic punctuation. And there's just some people you're like, oh, I could like play with you. We're on the same wavelength. And he and I also just feel, I think, the same amount of deep empathy with the audience, and maybe to the point of like really making sure the audience is on board with the energy of the scene. I think that Seth, more than anyone I've ever worked with, is kind of standing up for the audience at every creative decision point, saying like, no, they don't care about this point, or they don't know what we're talking about or they need this or that. And that was great because having that in this rehearsal process was really helpful because he has a simplicity to the way he approaches it. Edward and Penelope have their own rhythm and their own approach, and it was a process of kind of learning their tone so that I could figure out how to make it all work together.
Where in this process, because originally you had the three of them, and originally there was a fourth. I feel like I know who it is. I went through the thank yous last night. ZS is my guess on the initial.
Oh, in terms of original casting conversations, never official. Yeah, there were original conversations.
You hadn't
never
originally
cast.
You never cast yourself, and you've credited Seth and Edward for talking you in to doing it. Where in the process is this in that workshop? Because my guess is you're maybe filling in that fourth role in workshop. When you got those 2 weeks. When in this process is it that they're talking you into playing Angela?
Early in that first week. That was, and really before then, because we wouldn't have gotten that close to production, I think, without a lead character. It would have been really scary. But it was really close to the wire that I was like, okay, let's do this. I'm going to do this. I can play her. If you guys really feel good about it. They were very adamant that I do it. Penelope was incredibly supportive. I think my fear was that any part of this operation would feel in any way underserved by me. I wanted to make sure I had my eyes and ears on everything. Because
the rhythm now, this is all about the rhythms and the interactions between the four of you.
Yeah.
You now have to do it from inside, feeling those rhythms as an actress.
Which ultimately became actually the answer, the way that it could work. It was much better for me to be sensing that rhythm from within than sitting at a monitor or standing by the camera trying to figure it out. I had to feel it with them. And I had to be able to see things that the camera couldn't see so that I could then make decisions about what we could shoot that I was noticing that maybe the camera hadn't noticed yet. It was like, oh, Seth is doing something really interesting over here. We have to come around and get it. Also, in the scene, you can just sense when something... Actors often really know how to fix a problem from within a scene. And I think being one of them allowed it to become clear to all of us at the same time. We'd say like, oh, we know what this means. And I could very quickly, without wasting any time that we did not have, say, let's go again, because we all understand what needed to change there.
We hadn't seen you on screen in a while. I mean, you've been very honest about the Darlings role, which was a financial decision.
Yep.
You needed someone cheap who could,
yes.
You guys had run out of money. And you're wonderful. It's a perfect role for you in that. But we hadn't seen you on screen for a while. And then at Sundance, we got Greg Araki's movie and then, of course, your own. Because I want to go to the studio for a second.
Mm-hmm.
What made you, because the first time we'd seen you in a while was you playing Olivia Wilde, the director.
Yep.
I mean, I've got my own theories here, but I mean, what made you, because everybody on that show, maybe Parker Finn, maybe Martin Scorsese, they're playing a satirical version of themselves. And clearly you are not that obsessive, crazy, have to shoot on film director, or maybe you are.
No,
but
now I am.
But there's a thing here where it feels like maybe a freedom of poking fun at yourself.
Oh, 100%. It was a gift of an opportunity to poke fun at myself. I was thrilled when Seth and Evan pitched it to me. I laughed so hard and I said, you guys, thank you. I've kind of been avoiding this business in many ways for the past couple of years, working in development, trying to figure out exactly how I wanted to kind of re-engage. And this opportunity to just laugh at myself and at this industry with such a love and warmth that I feel for this business was such a gift. It was such a release. It was such a great way to re-engage, and it was also the environment of the studio is really an ideal creative environment. You can't help but be on that set and then feel inspired to want to make movies, and I think for me it was kind of healing. remember spending my, 2 days on that set and just thinking like, this is the greatest business in the world. I love this place because it's full of creative people who are being encouraged to be playful and take risks and experiment. And it's entirely run by Point Grey, and Seth and Evan are the creative end all be all kind of leaders of that operation.
There seems, and I've heard people describe this, and we did lots of stories about the studio too, because I think there's a connection here. Obviously, Seth and Evan write all these scripts. I mean, it's not like they come in half-assed, but they specifically create a situation for themselves where there's incredible pressure and tension. In this case, we're going to do it all in a Warner.
Yeah.
You're going to block it, and we're going to allow ourselves time to figure out how we're going to do this, but leaving something there underneath that pressure cooker to allow something to be created.
Oh, yes.
And it feels like, and I can't help, I have to imagine it's not by accident that, you and Seth went and did this, but then you also took Adam Newport-Berra with you. Is there something there? Because it feels like, listening to you describe the invite, there's.
Oh, absolutely. The connection is that the environment on the set of the studio is exactly as you describe it. It is one that is incredibly well prepared and designed, but allows for spontaneous creativity. And that balance is really, really difficult. And I want to be in business with anyone who can achieve that balance. And Adam Newport-Berra, as a cinematographer, is so ambitious and so skilled that even 2 days on that set observing him made me quite sure that that was the kind of partner I would need on the invite, because I wanted to make something very intentionally designed and crafted, but allow for flexibility so actors could improvise and discover, and we would be spontaneous, but within this very defined structure. He is, I think, making some of the most interesting movies today. I think Adam has exceptional taste, and Seth believed in him completely, and that entire crew. And so the entire camera crew was with us on the invite. And I'm so happy because it's a very unique energy that they have. And when I went to visit season 2, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about it already, but they're being even more ambitious in season 2.
I want to come back to that for a second, but now let's go back to, you are still allowing improvisation. You're shooting chronologically. You're allowing for improvisation with dialogue. And my sense is a little bit of, well, if something happens between yours and Seth's characters here, that's going to have a ripple effect,
exactly,
like where it's going.
Yes.
So, because I want to then come back to the geometry of how you shot this. But first, that's something, whatever you're wanting to continue what you're doing in workshopping through the 23 days of shooting.
Yes.
And going chronologically.
Yeah. Exactly. We wanted to continue workshopping, which was, it forced us to kind of stay engaged and stay alert. There was the opportunity to continue evolving. So you were allowing for yourself to be informed, and so that you could come up with good ideas for the next day, the next scene, the next week. For instance, 2 examples of this are from Penelope and Edward. Penelope came to me at one point and said, while we were filming, we were in the probably second week of production, and she said, I have an idea for the scene where I seduce Seth's character, Joe, and I think it should involve music. I think that it should be Sade, and I think I should sing to him. Now, this is a pretty big swing, and something that was very different from what was on the page, but was such a perfect idea for her character that she had understood at that point that she may not have been able to understand 3 weeks prior in rehearsal. It was like the knowledge of the first couple of weeks of production had given her the understanding of exactly how her character would approach that seduction scene. So I think that allowed me to understand the value of not blocking off new ideas just because you have like begun production, because it's in production, particularly when you're shooting in order, that you really start to understand who you are and what this story has become. At this point, it's become something entirely different than what you, in any movie, what you planned. Another example is Edward, who wrote his monologue at the end of the film, which came from his...
About 2 minutes of screen time?
It's about 2 minutes of screen time.
Good Lord.
And it was about 8 minutes of actual monologue that he performed. That it was a surprise to me on the day. Not that he was going to tell a story. He told me, I have a story I want to tell.
Well, he made up the story.
He made it up. He said, I have a story I want to tell that will explain why my character has chosen this name. But I don't think I should tell you ahead of time because I want you to hear it for the first time on film. So he said, can you do your coverage first and let me tell the story? And I said, yeah, that's so great. That's so exciting. Later, Edward said, like, I did not think you were going to say yes. I don't know any other director who would have said yes. I was like, but I knew at that point, you knew exactly who you were playing. He knew Hawk better than I did. So of course he should tell the story and I should take the opportunity as his scene partner in that moment to hear it for the first time on film. Like, what a gift. So those are examples of allowing for continued evolution once you've started filming. The end of the film was something that Seth and I workshopped up until the last minute. We really, it was
kind of... the end is different. The end is different than the original movie.
Oh, yes. Yes. And very different from our script.
Okay.
From the original script.
Can we talk about, because it's like, we can go back to the beginning where I feel like you layer in some of that. But I mean,
yeah.
Are you able to say like how it evolved and how that changed? Well,
one important way it evolved is that we stripped away a lot of the dialogue that, while really well written, was clearly unnecessary for two characters who we realized at that point had been so verbose, so kind of constantly, almost manically kind of combative with chatter. And we thought the thing that actually would show how impacted they are by what's just happened in the film would be silence.
They've already made a decision.
They've made a decision. And we felt at that point that the audience didn't need to be held, that we didn't need to hold their hands through the reasons for the decision and what we felt about each other and what we wanted for each other. It was silence that would communicate the kind of shell-shocked realization of the enormity of what we had just decided to do. And it felt very honest to us. And it only became clear once we had shot the rest of the film. So it's one of those decisions, again, where in a rehearsal space and prep, I don't think it was possible to be clear about that. And had we shot out of order, we wouldn't have had the confidence to do that. But because we had shot everything else, we knew that there was nothing else that needed to be said. It was actually about the silence. And I'm so grateful for that, because I feel that it was the kind of creative risk, because it felt very risky to me. I think I fear silence in general, but particularly when making films, I think it's sometimes the hardest thing. I'm always tempted, like, okay, we should put some more music in. We should add some lines, like something's got to happen. But the ability to be quiet and to trust that the audience is listening is something that I've learned quite a lot about through this process. And I have such immense appreciation for these audiences so far who stick with those moments in silence.
And it also, I imagine there's a humor aspect here.
Yes.
I remember Seth saying at Sundance that there's a couple dirty jokes that he was surprised made it in. He hadn't seen the movie. A couple jokes that he was surprised made it in.
Yes.
And that made me think that he gave you multiple options.
Oh,
when
yeah.
I watched that last night, I couldn't help but notice you broke.
I did. I break twice.
But that
the one, count the rings, I break. Yep. And then his other joke about condoms. Do you know which one I mean?
Yes. I was thinking of the rings one.
The rings one. In both of those jokes, I break. And it was like, there was nothing else. I couldn't use another shot because it was the perfect shot of Seth. So I was like, well, I guess we have to use the one where I break. But it is It kind of became amazing that this character who had become so adversarial to him, he still makes her laugh, and it was perfect. But no, there's a whole treasure trove of Seth alts that, like in every movie he does, that it's an embarrassment of riches.
So not only is there this freedom of story, this is freedom of dialogue. My other understanding is a freedom of staging and blocking to a certain degree.
Yes.
Okay, here's where I'm confused, and I need you to get very nerdy and specific. I'm going to start with a compliment. This is one of the better limited space exercises I've ever seen. It is geometric in a way that is in a reinvention of the space. And so both in terms of how the set's built, but also in terms of the framing and the composition and the way that you're using that space and constantly redefining space on where that relationship is, and the framing is masterful. So help me understand how that coincides with then the freedom of blocking and staging, and how you work that. Is this a matter of you and your production designer, Jade Healy, and Adam have such a plan, and you've built a set in such a way that there's, I don't know, help me understand.
Yes,
because clearly there is a plan here in place, visually and geometrically.
It began with the brain trust of Adam, Jade, and myself wrestling with the challenge of the limited space and how we could make that interesting, and how we could turn the space into a character, and how we would use framing to take advantage of said character. And we came up with a certain set of rules. The idea that we would embrace frames within frames, that we would use the architecture to create barriers between characters who still had emotional barriers. We would use mirrors to allow characters to share space without seeing each other. We would use glass. We would use walls, and then slowly remove these barriers. The concept of windows, the concept of a few motifs that you see over and over again in the film, those were all part of a kind of list of ideas that the three of us really laid out at the beginning of production, and Jade built towards it when she designed the set, and Adam designed in his kind of I don't know if we can call it shot listing, because we weren't overly prescriptive about shot listing, but at least in his approach and in our research in terms of references that we really wanted to be inspired by from films who had kind of used some of those same motifs and we knew had done it very, very well.
Such as I love what limited space.
Amor was a huge source of inspiration, because that is also a set built on stage that feels very real.
Mm-hmm.
Films that don't, Hannah and Her Sisters is not a limited space film. You move in and out of those places, but that apartment, all the apartments in that film really informed a lot of the design for our apartment and the way we used the space. I always think about the scene in Hannah and Her Sisters when the cocktail party is happening, where Carrie Fisher and Diane Wiest are working as caterers at the party, and they've started their catering company, and they're in the kitchen, and the kitchen door keeps swinging open and closed, and Sam Waterston is in the kitchen with them, flirting with them, talking about taking them to the opera. And it's just like one of the greatest scenes in any film, and it was a scene like that doesn't seem like it directly references the way we were creating the space, but it was part of this kind of treasure trove of references that really informed doorways into kitchens, doorways, hallways, people overhearing each other, etc. I loved our kind of shared vision at the beginning that allowed for the spontaneity of the actors, because I was not going to tell these actors exactly where to stand or how to be, but they're all filmmakers. So when I described the approach and the theory behind how we were going to use this space, they were very intrigued by the idea that we could use the architecture and the framing to allow the audience to feel at first unsettled, incredibly uncomfortable, socially awkward, and then slowly kind of unravel that to become very exposed. They were on board with the theory and they understood it well enough that then I didn't have to be overly prescriptive about where they should stand and how they should be. They sort of understood the assignment and thought, oh, I get it. If we stand at 4 opposite kind of corners, this will allow for this kind of unsettling, awkward effect on the audience so that people don't really know where they are in the space and what they're looking at and how they should be. I mean, it's really interesting when the actors and the crew become one, as opposed to the crew not really being informed about the story, not really being invited into the creative process, and therefore they can't really meld with the actors in this kind of effort to have this flow. That, when I see that on other sets, have experienced that, I'm like, what a missed opportunity. In this one, our incredible Steadicam operator, Mark, was so emotionally involved in this story that he would know exactly the purpose of a movement in a scene and why we were moving and who we were aligning with at that moment, because he was very connected to the story itself.
And you needed to limit how many people. I mean,
very
obviously,
small crew.
Jay's got an art department that could do things ahead of time.
Yeah.
You've got lighting built into the set.
Yes.
So it's not that people didn't have important roles ahead of time, but then once you became shooting, you are pulling back. If anybody goes to a movie set, I think people are always surprised that there's 150 people standing around. And it seems as if you wanted to pull that back.
We pulled back, though I have to say, like, it's a testament to Adam's crew that it wasn't all built in lighting. There was a lot of work done by that grip department to create the lights that allowed for the film.
But still a pre-lighting. So
yes,
yeah.
But they were really like ballet dancers. I mean, they were moving around us in a way that I was amazed that everyone was able to achieve this level of calm with a crew in this pretty small space. I mean, we really did limit the people, though, and it created this kind of little island, because within this soundstage, we built the set inside of it, and it was like when you walked in, very few people would actually walk in the door to the apartment. And once you closed that door, you just felt like you were in an apartment, and you completely forgot everything around you. And it wasn't an invisible crew. It wasn't like, zone of interest, something that fascinates me, the idea of that, and what a dream to experience something like that one day. But it still felt like a bubble. And I think that relaxation allowed for a playfulness that led to the more spontaneous, interesting stuff happening.
I want to talk about the use of humor. I've seen this now twice with an audience.
Yes.
And you get the laughs. The word that often gets used is cringe.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels to me like I'll just say what my interpretation and let you run in is. There is a cringe aspect to it, but it has a lot to do with what your character and Seth's character don't want to deal with or reveal. And so it feels like the humor not only gets laughs, but it also serves a very specific role in terms of opening up the movie to a certain degree.
Yes. Well, I think the goal was to make the spoken punchlines as funny as the unspoken punchlines, which are the kind of silences in between and the unsaid moments of extreme rage or tension. A look becomes itself a line of dialogue when the audience is aware of the significance of that look. And our job was to explain enough to them about our situation at the beginning that they would understand the significance of a silent look later on. So the early scenes in the film allow you to understand the way that they communicate when they're alone, so that you can see how they're not communicating once there are witnesses, but you know what they wish they could say to each other. And at the end of the film, you really see how differently they behave alone once they've been witnessed. Once that there's been a combustion. They've been revealed. So I love awkward tension. I love it. I think it's because so many, a lot of my family is British. I think that the idea of like hanging on in quiet desperation and the intensity of unspoken tension, I just think it's the funniest thing in the world. And people caring very deeply about something that they can't speak up about. I find it very funny. There's something to hilarious to me about people like trying very hard not to express how they're really feeling. I don't know. It always gets me. And this movie, I wanted you to feel recognized. That my favorite type of laughter, I keep saying this about this movie, but it's really true, is the laughter I hear in the audience that sounds like people have recognized themselves and they're saying, I thought I was the only one. And there's this sense of like relief in that laughter that like, oh God, I know I'm that person, or I've seen that in my relationship. And I wanted that kind of laughter to be something that is poking fun at ourselves as like ridiculous human beings and just allowing for the pressure release of that there's some kind of healing effect of releasing the pressure of like shame, of all of this tension that we hold in how we think we're meant to be in relationships. And if you just prove that we're all struggling, then their shame is released and the air is let out of the room, and it just feels very good.
And that being grounded first in their fight, and then it is a four-hander, but it does feel like what you just said, we're seeing ourselves in yours and Seth's character.
Yes.
So I want to go to Penelope Cruz's character for a second, because obviously she carries a lot of the ideas.
Yes.
It's very funny. We keep coming back to podcasts, and I know you had advisors and things like this, but there's an element there. She's fantastic. Let's just get that out of the way.
Yeah.
But there's an element there that feels like that role and how you approach that role is a complete wild card.
Yeah.
More
Yes.
so, not that but it feels, I wonder if you could talk about that, because a little bit also with Edward Norton character, just the utter sincerity. But again, they're fantastic. But it's just interesting the choices made there and how, because ultimately they have to instigate and how we get there.
Yes.
And I wonder if you talk a little bit about that.
Yes. I think subverting expectations and cliches is one of the more fun things about storytelling. Having the opportunity to say, there is a really simple way to tell this that you might be used to, and let's do it a very different way. I think for female archetypes, particularly that of seductive women, there is this lane that we sort of expect of the kind of character who is a bit of a like Jessica Rabbit, temptress of the night, who is the sort of object of everyone's attention and affection, and is sort of just like this engine of desire. And it felt like that was certainly not worthy of Penelope Cruz, nor the audience's attention. It just felt tiresome, and we've seen it before. So I was like, okay, but the point of this character is not that she is this seductress. The point of this character is that she is like this oracle. She has this perspective that allows the rest of these characters to see their lives completely differently and is entirely non-judgmental. She is confident in a way that comes from knowledge and comes from curiosity. And I thought all of these elements make her someone that is magnetic, not just because she's beautiful and sexy, but because she seems to kind of hold these answers. She has this magnetism that I actually feel I often recognize in women who have been through things in life, people who are a little bit older, wiser, and have experienced enough so they have a certain calm sense of wisdom. I just find it incredibly attractive. People who just don't need to be the loudest person in the room, often don't say very much, but clearly are hearing everything and actually have opinions on everything, and often really interesting, unexpected solutions to problems. She had to embody all of that. So I had to find an actress who could be all that. And then once Penelope came on board, she took that challenge and said, but I want to make her playful. I want to make her unexpectedly sort of, I hate the word quirky, but I feel like it very quickly, it's like an efficient way to explain the kind of idiosyncratic, playful, interesting woman. Unexpected. And I think choices Penelope made immediately made it clear to me, not only that, the choice of like the Sade kind of set piece with Seth, but also her choice to interact with her environment in the way she does as an actress. She's incredibly present in every scene. She uses her props. Many actors don't even kind of touch their hair or face when they're acting. Like there's this sense of paralysis. And Penelope is just like alive in the frame. And I would watch her and realize she's making this environment seem real because of the way she's interacting with it. There was a scene where she and Seth have smoked a joint and they're just kind of chatting. And the intention of the scene was to show this non-judgmental warmth she was showing him that was kind of blowing his mind because he hadn't felt that in such a long time. And there was an ease between them, a chemistry that you wouldn't expect. And she brought this incredible giddiness to this scene and started playing with the xylophone and playing with all the props and doing things that really completed the scene for me in a way that I don't even cut away. There's like a few moments where it seems clear I should be cutting to Seth, and I just can't because I'm like, she's so interesting and unexpected. So she made this character who I had idealized as this kind of wise oracle and made her human. And similarly with Hawk, Edward knew that there was probably the most work to be done on his character. That character was kind of a foil for Joe, but was not particularly developed. And Edward infused a tremendous amount of specificity and allowed for this innocence, this kind of infantile purity to this character that then would reveal itself to be based in trauma and rebirth. Like he just brought all these layers to it, but we never lost the goal of just keeping it, of just allowing it to be funny. Like that was so delightful. It was that everyone was aware we were making something funny and it should be fun, but just because it's funny doesn't mean it has to lack, complexity and depth.
This film went into Sundance when we ran phone calls for very understandable reason. It was the number one target of sales titles, and the cast, the pedigree, and the fact that people like Eugene were telling us, oh, people are going to like this one, and it's just interesting to me. And then of course there was a bidding war for it. And it's just interesting to me, and I'm hoping you could zero in on it. You also said on opening night, this couldn't have been a studio film. And I'm just trying to square those two things.
Yeah.
Is this partially about a process?
Yeah.
Or is this partially about content? Or I wonder if you could...
Yeah, both. Because this film is such a product of the process. This film was not something that could have been predetermined or planned for. There's
no pages for a studio?
There's no pages for the studio. Exactly. That's exactly right. It would have been impossible for a studio to allow for the kind of flexibility that this process required. And things like the score. The score is something I'm incredibly proud of. Dev Hynes designed this incredible score. It's pretty unique. It's aggressive. It doesn't seem at first like something you would expect from a playful comedy. It's very dramatic. It's all on a cello. I can imagine every studio saying like, no, this is not something that we understand. And there's no, it doesn't fit into the mathematical equation we have here to tell us whether something's going to work. The risks that we had to embrace, that we got to embrace, that led to the reward of the film are just not allowed in the studio system unless you're Paul Thomas Anderson or Quentin Tarantino. There's obviously outliers, but I think certainly the process and this writing process, certainly the content and things like the ending, allowing for it to be intentionally ambiguous. I can only imagine the battle I would have had at a studio about that ending. And I hope that this movie, it already has surpassed my expectations. It did at Sundance. It did when it got into Sundance. I was already at that point just so happy, so proud. If it had ended there, I would have been thrilled. At this point, as we head into theatrical release and hope for many people to see it, I hope that studios recognize that the risks are worth it. Audiences can recognize risks. Audiences know that you risked them not liking it. And that's why they appreciate that you went for it. And they know, they like the feeling that the person next to them might not get it like they get it. And it gives this sense of ownership of like, that was for me. I like that. And it's something that I still think the studio system really struggles to embrace.
In particular with comedies, because there's something here, and I'm wondering if you could talk about this when you were a hot sales title and after it did screen and everybody wanted it. The idea that somehow comedies are now something for streaming.
Yeah. Yes.
And you do get a lot of collective laughs. And that's the one I don't understand. Like, to me, the joy of seeing it again last night with an audience was all of us laughing. And I'm wondering, luckily you did have the advantage of lots of being the prettiest girl at the ball.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to make it sexy, but you know what I'm
no,
saying?
I hear you. Yeah.
Of everybody, but like that idea, how important was it to you to draw a line there with theatrical?
Very important. For me, it was a non-negotiable. I was very lucky that I was supported in that by Annapurna. I think that Megan Ellison could have easily said, no, we can get more money from Netflix. Easily. And I know Netflix is starting to change the way they work, and I'm thrilled that they're embracing
mixed messages, but it depends what week where we are.
Sure, exactly. I am eternally grateful that the decision at that point of where this film should go, what its home ultimately would be, who would be releasing it to the world was left to me. That is something that I am so blown away by, that amount of trust. And I think she knew that I knew this movie in my bones, and I knew where it belonged. I could sense that the team at A24 understood what it was. They understood that it was not just a sort of a chamber piece for an adult audience, meaning like older people. They were like, younger people like comedy. They, it would be so limiting to think of it in this way. They were the ones who said, let's give this a summer release. Let's be ambitious with this. And their approach to marketing felt very much in line with the way that I like to work. And I do feel that this idea that comedies belong on streaming is something that we have slowly accepted over the last couple of years. It's new. I hope it's ending. I mean, I love hearing about all these great comedies that are coming to theaters soon. I really can't imagine anything more healing right now for people, other than watching the Knicks win the championship, I can't imagine anything more healing than sitting in a theater and laughing with people. It's like medicine. And I think that everyone should be really working towards, more theatrical comedies. I'm certainly doing my part. I'm trying to make more. It's so weird that we did get to this point where we just expected that, if you make a comedy like this, it'll end up on streaming. I think that even in production, there was the assumption of like, well, I guess they'll probably want to just like toss it on Netflix. But the thing is, this is a kind of movie that you need to watch and listen to. And if you have a phone in your hands, you won't get it. And I think we both know they are making movies specifically for people with a phone in their hand now, which is like the most devastating thing that's happened. And I think that's the thing about being in a theater, not only is it the lovely collective experience of everyone enjoying something together, but you are forced to pay attention. I think that is meaningful. And I think that if we start making movies without that expectation, we won't feel obligated to make things that are really worthy of the audience's attention. We'll start thinking, well, we can repeat the plot 6 times because they probably weren't paying attention the first 5 times. And we'll make worse movies. So theatrical, obviously I believe in it, but I think audiences do as well. I mean, remains to be seen, but I have hope.
Well, hopefully people will go see this one in the theaters, and congratulations. It was wonderful.
I love having conversations with you. You're the best. It was so fun at Sundance, and I really enjoyed this. Thank you.